says the same thing.
Okay.
Bill did, it just did it in a different way. Yeah.
Like I said, you've been busy.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I am Sharon Green Middleton, Vice President of the City Council, representative for the 6th Council District, and Chairperson of the Economic and Community Development Committee. This afternoon, we will meet on the following bills: 21-0101R, 22-0101R, 22-0140R, and 22-0204. In attendance today, we have members of the committee, which is John Bullock of the 9th District,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilwoman Odette Ramos of the 14th District,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
and Robert Stokes of the 12th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And representatives of the Office of the President. We have Aaron DeGraffenreid, our General Counsel.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. And representative of the Mayor's Office. We have Sophia G. Okay, let's begin. Council Resolution 22-0101R, informational hearing, Mayor's recommendations, 30-day review of strategies to eliminate vacant abandoned properties. For the purpose of inviting the City Administrator, the Deputy Mayor for Economic and Community Development, the City Solicitor, the Commissioner of the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Director of Finance, the Director of the Department of Public Works to appear before the Baltimore City Council to present the findings and recommendations of the Mayor's 30-day review for eliminating privately and publicly owned vacant and abandoned properties. This resolution was introduced on April 5th, 2022. This resolution was sponsored by Councilwoman Ramos. I will now reconvene the meeting to review. At the last meeting held on July 12th, 2022, the committee had a robust discussion about key concerns surrounding vacants in Baltimore. For those interested in recording of the previous meeting, a recording of the previous meeting can be accessed on Charm TV, and related documents can be accessed on the city's Legistar website. At that meeting, we found that Mayor Scott issued a memorandum dated March 1st, 2022, with a brief history of vacant property in the city, along with recommendations for solutions. Former Chief Administrative Officer Christopher Shorter, as well as representatives of other city agencies, also shared information with the committee about the mayor's strategy for eradicating vacancies. Councilmember Ramos, I understand that you communicated with the administration outlining things you would like the agency to report on at this meeting as it relates to your resolution. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Also want to acknowledge our city administrator is here. I think she'll be giving a few remarks as well. Okay. Thank you again, Madam Chair, and all of you that are here. This is a check-in. As the chair said, we received, or the city issued a memorandum dated March 1st that outlined the strategies that were put in place as you recall, after the tragic fire on January 24th, 2022, the mayor assembled a robust team to look at the various policies and procedures regarding vacant properties and issued a memorandum. And so we had a meeting in July, as Madam Chair said, to go over what those strategies are. We took testimony. As you remember, it was very emotional testimony as well. And so today is a check-in on where we are related to those strategies. If you look at the memo, which I sent to the committee, and I believe it was sent also by council committee staff, There are strategies in the memo regarding funding, which, as we know, is really critical to this work. There are strategies related to the impact investment area, block level planning, which I do know has been moving forward, and looking forward to hearing more details. The vacancy prevention strategies, which are extremely important because we don't want any more vacant properties coming onto the vacant property rolls. Also, legal and regulatory strategies, and then process improvement, and of course some legislative. So look forward to hearing from the administration on where we are and taking questions from the committee. We don't have testimony lined up today, and just trying to get a sense of where we are on this issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and, is it housing that?
City Administrator first.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with City Administrator.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chairwoman Middleton, members of the committee, and council staff. For the record, I am Faith Leach, Acting Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Baltimore. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to share the progress the Scott administration has made since the release of the 30-day vacant review. Before I go into my formal testimony, I want to acknowledge the 3 brave firefighters that lost their lives after fighting a fire in a vacant row home right here in our city. Every day, the men and women serving on the front lines in our communities navigate the unknown to ensure our safety. On that fateful day in January, these firefighters made the ultimate sacrifice, and their loved ones, this government, and this city continue to mourn their loss. I want to pause for a moment to, of course, acknowledge those firefighters, but to also thank each and every public servant that is here with me today for their service to our city. Vacant properties disproportionately impact residents in majority Black communities in Baltimore, compromising the quality of life of residents, creating significant public health challenges, and negatively impacting property values and significantly weakening the city's tax base. As such, Mayor Scott has set a focused agenda to address these properties and their impact on our communities. When Mayor Scott released his 30-day vacant review recommendations, he committed to the residents of this city that his administration would not let the urgency of the moment subside with the news cycle. Instead, the Scott administration, with the support of this council, has remained diligent in tackling this issue. Just over the last year, meaningful action has been taken on these recommendations. Since January 2022, the Scott administration has launched a tax sale exemption program and removed more than 100 properties from tax sale, improved tracking of properties sold at receivership, launched an in-rem foreclosure to expedite removal of nuisance properties, launched the Unsafe Vacant Marking Initiative, stepped up cleaning and securing of vacant properties. We also have launched a pilot crime prevention through environmental design concept in 2 communities, and we announced a $15 million investment in our impact investment areas. In sum, we have reduced the number of vacant properties by 754. We are now at the lowest level or number of vacant properties in decades. While we have made significant progress, I will be the first to tell our residents that we have much more to do, and we must do it faster. This administration believes that we must take a whole of government approach in addressing the more than 14,000 identified vacant properties. That is why Mayor Scott tasked the city administrator with leading a cross-functional working group made up of agencies ranging from DHCD and DPW to BPD and BCFD, because we all play a critical role in addressing this issue. Today, you will hear from several of the agencies tasked with leading critical aspects of this work. First, you will hear an update from the Department of Finance on the research we have done to identify additional funding resources, followed by DHCD, who who will lead us through a line-by-line update of each recommendation listed in the 30-day vacant review memo. Council members, our residents, especially those living in communities plagued by decades of disinvestment, deserve beautiful, thriving neighborhoods with the same amenities that abound in other neighborhoods. That is why the Scott administration is hyper-focused on improving our neighborhoods for the better. And I pledge that we will continue to remain relentless in our work to address vacant properties across our city. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. With your permission, I will now turn it over to the Deputy Director of Finance, Bob Sinema, and then to Commissioner Alice Kennedy.
Yes, Bob, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Bob Sinema, Deputy Finance Director. And I wanted to share a couple of comments about some of the research we've done on items in the report, things that we've explored in terms of funding availability. So first I wanted to start with the question of increasing the city's GO bond capacity. That was one of the ones listed front and center of what that would look like and how that would be achievable. We do, the Department of Finance policies that we do a debt capacity study every 5 years. Last one was done in 2019, so we're due for another one next year. In those reports, we look at certain measures to compare ourselves to our peers. And our peers would look like other cities with similar bond rating as Baltimore. We're a AA rated city, and we looked at other cities compared to us. In that report back from 2019, there are two key measures that we look at to make sure that we're being responsible with our debt. One is making sure that our debt service is within 10% of our overall operating budget. We've generally been between 7 and 8%, and again, best practice is that you stay below 10%, so I think we're safe there. The second measure is debt. Of your outstanding debt, how much will be paid within the next 10 years? The city is over 70% of its debt will be repaid within 10 years. The rating agencies generally want to see you at least 60% or above. So we're in decent shape there as well. And the idea of that measure is you don't want to get ahead of yourself where you're pushing too many costs. You're borrowing money and pushing the cost way out into the future where people kind of ignore it. So we score well on both of those measures. Ultimately, though, the challenge here is affordability, right? So even if you're within some of those peer measures, you have to be able to afford the debt service that becomes part of your operating budget when you borrow more money. And just to give an example, in the report, I talked about looking at issuing $50 million more of debt. What that would cost us is about $4 million of debt service per year for 20 years. And if you were to maintain a additional $50 million of borrowing, again, that's beyond our $80 million that we're borrowing today, going up to $130, you would have a growing cost that would get to $80 million of additional debt service costs within 20 years. So again, the challenge here is, can you afford the debt service on the other side when you do the borrowing? Our current financial environment is not great. One impact is that interest rates have risen over the past year or so, and that makes it more expensive to borrow. And then two, we're facing another wave of education costs from the Kerwin bill at the state level that's beyond what we had even anticipated for cost of Kerwin. So the outlook now, I would acknowledge, is a little bit cloudier than it was even a month or two ago. So given those limitations, we do try to make sure that we supplement our baseline borrowing capacity if we come across one-time resources. And as I have shared with the council, when we closed fiscal 22, we had a really tremendous year, largely because of higher revenues from the housing market. And we were able to actually propose an additional $11 million investment from FY22 surplus, specifically for vacant housing remediation. And that bill passed the Board of Estimates at the end of December, and it is pending with the City Council. So that's kind of our stance on GO bond at this point. Again, it's not a great time to be increasing our bond capacity because of some of those factors, but we have been, demonstrating a commitment that if we do come across one-time resources, vacancies is top on our list to prioritize. One other thing I wanted to mention is we were asked to look at creative uses of our TIF policy to see if we can do anything there. And we have made some progress there. We did reach out to our advisor that we use for analyzing those types of projects, MuniCap, and they've started to model out for us what something would look like in this arena. The idea would be you would borrow some funds to do some kind of vacant remediation, and then the increase, projected increase in property tax revenue would be able to pay off that additional increment or that additional debt service cost. So we're looking at that. You know, I'm not ready to endorse that yet because we still have some work to do with our advisor to see if that would be a smart strategy. But we are looking at that option. And I wanted to also mention just a couple other things. Again, one of the comments in the original report was looking at the federal infrastructure bill, and I was able to get some information this morning from our director of the Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development, Matt Garbark, who's been looking at the recent federal legislation and what's available there. And say the bad news is that there's nothing directly for vacant housing remediation, but the good news is there's a lot of provisions in the bill that would supplement programs that are designed to help keep people in their homes, so kind of avoiding future vacancies. And just a couple examples that were shared with me, there's a low-income home energy assistance program, which is an existing program which has been extended and given more funding in the federal infrastructure bill. There's a weatherization assistance program, same situation where we've added, the infrastructure bill added additional funding to that program. And again, those are things that look to low-income folks and to see if we can help them either save money on their energy cost or, you know, better weatherize their home so they have lower energy costs. And all those things help because they keep, you know, folks in their home. We also did learn that federal infrastructure funds could be used for demolition if it's part of a larger project, but we don't know yet if we can do that. Again, there's no money that's just for, you know, vacant remediation or demolition, but if it was part of a larger project, like a transportation-related project, it's possible that we could use some of the funds for that. There's also the Inflation Reduction Act, which, again, MOID shared with us that there are a couple programs there similar. The Home Energy Whole House program and the Green and Resilient Retrofit program are also both existing programs where they've added money to an existing program that we might be eligible to get some of those funds or apply for those funds. So those are the things we've looked at. Of course, the other thing on the list, we're always lobbying for more help from our state partners, of course. That's almost goes without saying. But we have looked at a lot of options. Again, our position is we've got to be, you know, prudent about GEO-bond capacity, but we are dedicating any one-time resources to this problem. We've looked at the federal infrastructure bill. We think there will be some opportunities there. And of course, we're always working with our state partners to see if we can get help from those folks as well. So I can turn it over, I think, now to Alice, unless there's any questions about any of those items.
Before you move on, I want to recognize a member of the committee that has joined us, Councilman Ryan Dorsey of the 3rd District, and also just want to remind the press that you do have your designated area back there. We are talking about safety, and when we do build up in our chambers with a number of people, safety is important, and we do have COVID regulations, so you do have your designated area back there, so please don't take offense to your movement and moving you back in that area. We want to stay with our guidelines, and as I said, we're in a subject right now too, talking about vacants and the safety. And something else just, I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. It was after our city administrator's presentation. You know, our city is also a long-standing member of the Maryland Association of Counties, and as a past president of that organization, and Councilwoman Ramos and I serving on the legislative committee, just mentioning last year, housing was given our Urban Innovation Award. In fact, it was the first award for the city in a very long time. And it made me think of this because of, you know, the tragedy that happened with our firefighters. We don't want that to ever happen to anyone, including our residents of the city, ever again. And our city won that Urban Innovation Award because of a wonderful program that was a partnership with Carnegie Mellon University, and we didn't even use general funds. So I don't know if that's going to be in your presentation, but it's always something to, and very important to share, and can't thank you again enough for applying and winning that state recognition. And now you're on.
Thank you, Chairwoman and members of the committee. Good afternoon. One key piece that we want to go through, we're going to go through, and I'll lead the discussion in terms of the line-by-line reporting piece on the items that were in the vacant memo. We do have and have created a kind of stoplight type of document that provides, snapshot, very easy to look at in terms of what is in process. Some items are actually kind of process started and ongoing, because some items will be ongoing. Others have noted as being completed, and some are also pending start, which there are a couple that we'll talk about that are pending start that after further evaluation might seem that are something that we wouldn't end up moving into. So I will start off with just saying I'm going to echo CAO Leach's remarks that progress has been consistent and has been focused within the work of not just DHCD, but also across all of the agencies that are responsible for assisting in reducing and preventing vacant properties within the city of Baltimore. All staff members within DHCD understand the mission and the vision, and it takes every staff member, all 400 and over 400 of us across every single division, working to diligently attack the problem of vacant buildings within our city. I will repeat that as of today, we are at 14,278 vacant buildings, which is the lowest that we have been in decades of vacant buildings within our city of Baltimore. So we've taken meaningful action on these steps, and we'll go through just giving the update kind of line by line. So I'm going to start with education campaign around homeowners insurance, and I'm going to actually lump that together. There are several items, whether or not it is in prevention or some of the other categories of housing and community development and operations and city services or system and process improvements that talk around either education campaigns, marketing, outreach and education and so forth. And what we've done is actually we've shifted a strategy. So we started working on those, and it was kind of a disparate, little bit of a disparate approach, but what we've done is shifted strategies and are going to be using an outside firm that we started to have conversations with, and we'll incorporate a number of those topics into kind of the final education and outreach campaign materials, which will cover everything from print, video, social marketing, storytelling, all of the different pieces, our community engagement and outreach as well that are needed to effectively move the education campaigns forward. That also involves convening focus groups around the education campaigns, with launching in early summer of 2023 kind of a comprehensive approach to all of those campaigns that are noted here. So it's homeowners insurance, which we continue to talk about on a regular basis. So while we're kind of shifting approach on the actual official campaign, does not mean that we are not regularly talking about the importance of homeowner insurance or the importance around vacancy prevention, which covers everything from homeowners insurance to estate planning. And that was one of the things too. There was some redundancy on some of those in the memo, so it's kind of pulling everything together under one umbrella for those. That also includes, tax sale prevention program. So this is an item that was specifically noted in the memo. That program has launched. DHCD manages that tax sale deferral program The applications actually opened February 15th. It closes April 15th. So for anyone that qualifies or would need to apply for that, we highly encourage that everyone completes their application. Last year, we were able to assist 117 properties and anticipate, being able to assist additional properties this year. The remainder of the year is also focused on promotion of the property tax credits and, referrals as well to anyone that needs assistance with the tangled title issues. And that also goes into, adding into that education campaign that I just spoke about above. One of the other line items that we get to around prevention is increasing funding for hubs. So one of the items that was in the mayor's ARPA commitment around housing was $7 million to support housing upgrades to benefit seniors, which is one of our most popular programs. It is a example of public, private, and philanthropic program support. For those that are not aware, that about 4 years ago now, in partnership with our philanthropy partners and our outside partners, we actually won the HUD Secretary's Award for public-private philanthropy for that program. There are $7 million allocated for the budget. We already have the pipeline of pre-applications. We have over 3,000 applications in the pre-app that we know of, and we also know that out of those 3,000 applications that we have in general, we have also over 2,000 that are age eligible for hubs. We still need to go through the next level of application review to ensure that they also meet the income qualifications and guidelines. But we know that we have over 2,000 applications that are ready to be moving forward, and the staff is actively kind of processing and moving those in. And we are also hiring the staff that's needed attached to that funding to be able to move those cases with our partners as quickly as possible. We know that any funding that we get for hubs, we typically are able to encumber and assign to cases very quickly. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the ARPA dollars, but that's one of those instances where it's essentially kind of, we know estimated how many cases there will be, and it'll just start kind of tumbling through and moving through very quickly. We have a number of, in terms of supporting pillar goal number 3, goal number 4 with attracting new residents, the Department of Planning, in partnership with Live Baltimore, the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Mayor's Office of Innovation, is actively working on the Mayor's pillar goal, pillar 3 in economic neighborhood development, goal 4 with attracting new residents. They have convened our growth stat type of meetings to look at the different metrics that are associated with population growth and attracting those new residents. As we know, attracting new residents to Baltimore is extremely important, and that population growth is extremely important when we talk about vacancy in terms of reduction as well as prevention. The ground rent redemption program, this is on, we're still in prevention, line by line. That has also started and is ongoing. We actually identified $100,000 to initiate the program. That's going to be limited because of the small amount. We're going to limit it to homeowners that are 30% AMI and below, which we know are a significant number of homeowners that we have within the city. We will continue to expand as we have additional resources that are identified. The application is currently being finalized and created in our Neighborly application portal, and the goal is to start accepting applications for that program on May 1st of 2023. I would defer, I believe, is Chief Stewart here? No. Yeah. He's at police stat. We also have been in partnership with the fire department in terms of the fire safety campaign and continued work along those lines. We have the vacant buildings marking program. I don't know if
You can come up to
yeah.
the podium if you'd like.
Good afternoon. Kim Washington, Fire Department. We have a vacant, we call it a Codex, vacant dwellings marking program. Our units go out every Wednesday to addresses in the city where we have vacant homes. People can also call us and alert us that if they feel there is an unsafe vacant dwelling in their community, we'll add it to the list and we go out, check them. If they meet certain criteria, we put it in the system, in our CAD system, computer-aided dispatch system, and we are in the process of physically marking them with it's about this big red reflective sign that goes on the front of the property. So we are working closely with housing on that initiative.
Thank you.
Excellent. For general comments on that, I just want to remind everyone that the placard, like while the red squares are being installed on the buildings, that does not necessarily mean that that building is slated for demolition. So I just want to make that correlation very clear to everyone on the council, everyone in the audience, everyone that's online, that does not mean that that property is slated for demolition. It's very specific in terms of ensuring the health, safety, and well-being of our first responders as well as the community. The other item is just in terms of a general safety around the vacant buildings and community. Any community member should not be entering any building that has, first of all, vacant buildings should not go in. You absolutely should not be entering a vacant building that has the red placard on it. You are risking your life and the lives of others in the community by entering that building. And also, just want to note on that too, that is a key piece to the work and the partnership that we're doing. But please do not enter the building if you see the placard there. I also want to note at that point, kind of along those lines, DHCD actually produced and released, now I'm blanking on the exact date, late November, December, we produced and released a video that we did that was highlighting the community's work around fire safety and fire prevention in vacant buildings to help us. We have eyes on the street, we have inspectors out across, we have our, all of our staff, and we say that this is staff in every single division, even our rehab techs, everybody that is out doing work knows kind of the things to be looking for and has eyes on the street. But we did a video campaign specifically to highlight asking the community's assistance as well. That if you see anyone entering a vacant building or that you believe that there are people that are taking shelter in a vacant building that should not be taking a shelter in a vacant building, to please report that to 311, to please contact it immediately so that we can start our investigation, get all of our team together that coordinates a coordinated multi-agency response to remove those people from the property, to ensure with DPW that it's properly secured, which also helps us prevent fires in those buildings, especially during the winter months. Next line would be estate planning.
Hold it right there.
Hey, Commissioner,
Councilman Stokes has a question.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I do hear a lot of community people, when they see that on a building, they say, oh, the building should be torn down. My question is, that sign actually tell you about minor structural damage, am I correct? What do the X actually mean? If it doesn't mean that the building's gonna be demolished, what do the X actually mean? In terms of somebody rehabbing it, somebody buying it?
No, it has nothing to do with whether or not someone is rehab, because it is most likely a privately owned vacant that has not yet gone through an acquisition process for the city to acquire. So we at that point do not know if it is going to be potentially demolished, rehabilitated, or sold.
But I wasn't talking about, I'm saying when the X is on it, how much damage, what do that mean in terms of the X itself, not somebody purchasing or buying it?
Got it. It does address some of, I don't know if, Kim, if you want to talk a little bit about how we've done those assessments.
It's connected with the roof study too, right?
Hello again, Councilman. What the X signifies is that the structure is unsafe. So it's more of a warning system for our firefighters so that they know from when they come to the property that there is potential, you know, maybe missing ceiling, missing floorboards, missing floor, missing joists, so that they approach the fire with more caution.
Or that there was fire damage before.
One more question.
It could mean that, or it could be no fire damage. It could just be that it's unsafe. So you could go into a structure, there's no floor, they know in advance when they see the placard on front of the property that to approach it with more caution and more care.
But do that include city-owned property also?
Any property that is.
So I'm only asking, so if somebody want to purchase, whether it's city-owned property or they still can, it's just letting you know that it's dangerous. Thank you.
The additional work we've done in partnership, and this is also tied to the education campaign that I spoke about before, that also pulling this in for additional work, which is on the expanding of My Deed, My Legacy, also working to partner to find additional resources to support that program, and the importance of supporting estate planning and work there, because we know that that is a significant component when we talk about vacancy prevention. So we have and will continue to increase in terms of education around the program, and we are continuing to work with all of the partners associated with to find additional funding to support that and expand the program.
Before you move on, I just want to mention again, we're not taking public testimony for this bill. It's a voting session, but there is, I do want to recognize there is a comment in chat of a suggestion, and I just want to let you know we do have, we do see that suggestion, so thank you for writing your suggestion.
Pass it along.
Thank you. So one of the other piece that we will talk about now, kind of moving into legal and regulatory sections of the menu, of the menu. It is a menu of options. It's like a menu of the memo. Is increasing the tax lien foreclosure cases filed on vacant properties. As many of you know, this is a new tool. So we've always had the ability to do tax lien foreclosure cases. It's one of the key acquisition tools that DHCD has used previously and throughout the years. This is a new tool because of the in-rem in terms of ability to increase tax lien foreclosure cases filed on vacant properties. We, in partnership, have developed the model pleadings for judicial in-rem foreclosures. It's a new legal process for conducting these lien foreclosures on the abandoned properties. We've also developed a new web-based tool for preparing, tracking, and managing all of those cases, which is in line, and we've also been hiring the attorneys that are associated with the budget commitments that were made for fiscal year 23, and those are going through and getting into the, with those positions that have been created and moving forward. We worked with the circuit court to create that differentiated case management track, which will allow us to obtain those judgments in about 4 to 12 months. Our first judgments came in at the five-month period. We are not saying that we believe that every single judgment will be in the 5-month period, because we know that there will be some things that come up, and even in conversations with the court, there could be other issues that arise that make it go a little bit longer, but that is the fastest that we have ever had in terms of a tax sale foreclosure case, because of the in-rem process, which allows us to file that foreclosure case on properties where the liens are in excess of the assessed value of the property. We will continue to grow the number of cases that we can file and manage. In fiscal year 2024, with the increased capacity of staff, plus the tools that we've already started with getting the new software in package and so forth, we anticipate that we'll be able to hit in fiscal year 2024 filing 200 cases a month. So that is a goal in 2024 to be able to hit that, to be able to file those cases. This is one of those where we might have to get back to you on determining the owners with demolition and stabilization liens to determine collection cases and filing judgments. I know at one point,
That's something to do with the tax sale piece.
Yeah, and that's an update there. So we could provide additional information on that at another time or as a follow-up through memo to the committee. DHCD, in working with One House at a Time, has upgraded the legal database, which has allowed for better case tracking and for receivership properties. So this is also just a reminder, a receivership property is a code enforcement mechanism. It is the highest form of code enforcement that we have, and filing a receivership case does not always end in auction. Actually, a lot of times, and what we've been seeing is that by filing that receivership case, we're actually able to hold the owner accountable, and they are moving that property back into productive use, completing the renovations, obtaining the use and occupancy permit, and abating that vacant building notice. Code enforcement attorneys have reviewed all of the receivership appointments since 2016. They've also identified the properties that have required additional legal action or continued monitoring to bring those properties into compliance, and have been working closely with OHAT on that process as well.
So, Commissioner, just being conscious of time, if you want to, from this point, just kind of summarize the sections, and we can, read the details on our own. But I know how this is your passion, and but
okay,
we got to keep on with the time.
We will keep going and moving forward. I was going off of the earlier statement on the line by line, so we will move forward.
I asked for line by line, and this is great. Thank you.
So we also have, I'm not going to go, the next item was the circuit court with the separate docket for the tax lien for closure condemnation. That's a line, but I've already spoken about that one. The mayor's office, we have a pending start on exploring agreements with banks and states and federal agencies for their vacant properties. That's a small percentage of the vacant properties, and that has a pending start. We have partnered with SDAT to expedite ground rent releases. This is a very, important piece of the process. Once again, the campaign to increase property donations, that's part of the larger education campaign that I talked about earlier. We have added funding to the fiscal year 23 budget that would assist in covering the $600 fee for those property donations. We have launched the new software to improve the city-owned property disposition. That's the Buy Into Baltimore, Buy Into Be More initiative that is launched. We've also implemented and tied with that Slate, which is the workflow management tool, which is an online workflow management tool that automates many of the internal processes and increases the efficiencies and the approved accountability for our staff members, which is extremely important as part of all of this work. So we've had continued investments and new investments into the resources that are needed to effectively and efficiently move properties from vacant back into productive use. We have completed the review of all the publicly available materials. The fixed pricing model for properties, that is actually out right now for public comment. Public comment on that closes on March 10th. Includes fixed pricing for vacant buildings and lots. So we recommend that. We have moved through on the This is all within the housing and neighborhood development section of the memo. All of this is tied together. The fixed pricing model, the pilot of pre-approved properties, we're actually working with the law department on a different potential way to address that, to move those faster through that process. The standard operating procedure for the disposition in applications, that has actually been completed, that's available, and everything is actually, that's online as a graphic in terms of what that is. The marketing budget is completed, has been increased, and that's also tied as well to that overall additional education campaign. Continued under the housing and neighborhood development, we have the side yard policy review, which we've actually done in partnership with the comptroller's office, and there's more to come on that, but we identified 320 eligible MCC-owned lots, and then there's an additional kind of 101 lots as well. So as we continue to work through the housing and neighborhood development side, majority of those items are either process has started or ongoing. There isn't anything there that is pending start. We've identified and rehabbed, rehabbed and sold vacants with no use and occupancy permit, and we've actually created and drafted administrative rules that will assist property owners in bringing those properties into compliance. So if there ever is an issue where you have someone that shows up that is living in the property, that purchased a property, that doesn't know that it has a vacant building notice, which we've had this come up, we have finalized and worked on those administrative rules to help them move through that. In terms of stabilization, we've also are stabilizing properties, vacant properties next to owner-occupied properties. That is a priority for us, given the impact that vacant properties have on existing residents, either homeowners or tenants, but occupied properties, and where those vacant properties are next door. So we've done initial analysis for that in the impact investment areas, and we've also done additional analysis, not just in the zone ones, but we will actually look at all of the zones in the impact investment areas, as well as other areas that we work in across the city. So as we kind of round out, Deputy Director Seneme spoke about the financial tools in terms of the additional financial opportunities, adding 2 positions to the Department of Finance Lien Division. Those have been created, and actually one has already been hired at the moment. We have the we've worked through in terms of lien release and expungement process improvements. We've created, that working group was created, and we're getting close to finalizing processes in partnership with DPW that will unlock a barrier on the private market to release of water liens. And I know we have another hearing shortly here about the permitting piece, so I'm just going to quickly say that all of the permitting items are underway as we move through on the line by line. And once again, the education, outreach, and marketing components are going to be all part of that next level of campaign work. We have done the stepped up cleaning and boarding and securing of properties, which is a big one. DPW has been excellent as a partner. I know Yvonne is here, but I can just speak to this in essence of time. They've have a full kind of data and metrics that I'm sure DPW will be willing to share with the committee and members of council. But it has the list of properties that have repeat boarding. DPW boarding crew is actually using a new method of boarding. Problem properties with a 3-inch square head type of screws, with double boarding with adhesives and 2x4 slabs to secure windows when possible. We also have a significant update. We've increased and worked to expand not only just in-house ability for title work, but outside title work that is moving. We've explored blockchain technology to expedite title searches. This is one. We have secured pro bono legal services to assist with this. We've also secured the Johns Hopkins University Carey School of Business to provide research and help develop a strategy for that utilization of blockchain. And we have another firm that's assistance in looking at what it would look like for a pilot program for that as well. We talked about the vacant building and the roof analysis that was done. And that roof analysis just in the last 2 months has allowed us, not just allowed us, it has identified for us unsafe properties. We've completed 23 demolitions in the last 2 months and identified 2 city stabilizations, and then worked with private owners that completed 2 private stabilizations. The collaboration with the fire department has, continued. We've, established that data connection between the DHCD databases and CAD, and we've continued. DHCD has actually participated in the sweeps with the fire department to further advance their Project X-ray process. And we've also trained the fire department staff on how to use CodeMap and how to use that within the leadership, so that fire department leadership has that, and then they're also able to share that throughout the agency. One of the ones I just want to mention in terms of some of the pending starts, the streamlined service rules for privately owned vacants. That one we're have discussions with judges around the in-rem service that's looking at that, and that's going to also kind of inform some of the best approach to that topic. And there are some items where it could be a little bit more complicated on some of the other pieces, and we would have to coordinate with the law department and potentially introduce rules amendments to the Court of Appeals. And then the amending of the demolition permit, that will be occurring because we're about to go into the very busy season over the next 9 months of where we evaluate and what's needed to update the building code, Baltimore City Fire and related codes.
Thank you.
So that covers
Covers everything. It looks like you're got a head start on the budget season.
That covers the line by line. I do very briefly. I know that we are under some time and that we have the other, and I promise that I will go through this quickly. But we do have a presentation that I think is important that kind of ties this together to remind everybody about the work and what it ends up resulting in. Because I know that we're talking a lot about where we are and what's been happening and how this ties in, but it also ties into, the outcomes and what this work looks like on a holistic approach when you're looking at this kind of block by block and block level strategies that we're taking. So just overall, in terms of fiscal year 2022, some of the numbers of site assemblies, demolitions, and stabilizations. So when we talk about projects and what this means, if we can go to the next slide, just Kimberly can move on through and we'll just kind of go as we talk about. But just a reminder on some of these projects. These are some of the projects that have, we've been a part of over the last several months. But like for Marshall Gardens, that was over 140 vacant lots and condemned properties that we had to, assemble, pull together, hold those, and then work on renovation on, and then end up with the development. The 800 block of Harlem and Edmondson, 38 vacant properties that are currently under renovation and put back into productive use for home ownership outcomes, with a percentage of those actually being affordable home ownership outcomes. Same with Park Heights, site assembly work for over 15 years with demolition, site assembly, and we have those first 17 acres out right now and what that looks like. But that will end up bringing over 288 units and 78 units of brand new home ownership back to Park Heights. Site assembly for Coldstream Homestead Montebello, and that required 173 acquisitions and demolitions to date for the Tivoli Triangle area. you know, the work that we've done in Renaissance Row, which was a city-owned vacant row homes and vacant lots that, you know, were acquired and assembled for that work. Bakersview, which was 41 vacant buildings, land assembly, full block demolitions, stabilizations that were also part of that. Woodland Gardens, which is one that you know, is online. We've done work with ribbon cutting. We've done groundbreakings for, you know, Woodland Gardens 2 and then Woodland Gardens 1. You know, previously 48 city-owned vacant properties that were assembled and now coming online with new investment and units. Metro Heights at Mendalman, 12 vacant lots and vacant buildings. 1500 block of North Broadway, some before and after photographs. Stabilization, we talk a lot about stabilization, but this gives you an idea of what that stabilization looks like. This is stabilization in the 700 block of North Fulton, stabilizing those properties to be able to put them back into productive use, you know, for full renovation opportunities. Hope Village project, you know, 27 vacant lots that were assembled. All of the work with the Community Land Trust and the investments in the Community Land Trust through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the work that is going there for renovation of vacant properties to then create long-term affordable home ownership and housing units. The work through you know, home ownership through the acquisition program, home ownership assistance program, some more kind of before and after of the work that we're doing. Project Core and the work that Project Core has done and supported within the city and state partnership to remove blight, which was the $75 million invested over 4 years. That was 4,000 units of blight that was eliminated in result of that partnership. Green Mountain Chase, which is acquired property now into a new property there that we had the ribbon cutting for last year. The Fields for St. Francis, this is the acquisition of 143 parcels that have been acquired and now raised with vacant lots and vacant buildings. And all of this also leads kind of into that proof of concept that we have, which is the city-led interventions and the sustained effort of all of our partners to show those significant declines in vacants across the city and within our neighborhoods. So this is looking at the work. So we've had the concentrated approach that we've been looking at and the work that we've done with Mayor Scott and the administration and CAO and how we've been driving this. But we also know that over the years, with the concentrated efforts that we've been doing in our communities, that we have been able to show decline in vacants at the neighborhood level. So proof of concept neighborhoods such as a Greenmount West with a 75% reduction in vacancy, the Reservoir Hill with a 56% reduction in vacancy, Barclay with a 44%, and that's, you know, between the time of 2010 to 2019. And then moving into kind of the Johnson Square that we've worked on a partnership with the state. If this was a live map, we created a slide map where you can actually slide and show in time the change in vacancies within Johnson Square since 2010 with the concentrated efforts that we've done with development. So you see all the red on the first slide, and then that moves to showing more blue, which are the ones that are no longer vacant. I'm gonna go quickly to the next slide, which is the dashboard. So just a reminder that we track the vacants on a daily basis. We are thinking about this work daily. The dashboard is updated 3 times a day to show the reduction and where we are with the property count for vacant buildings. The vacant housing strategy within DHCD is you know, core and led by Mayor Scott, core to our equity framework and our equity in practice. The work that we do is in partnership with communities around the elimination of vacants, the prevention of vacants, and creating whole block holistic outcomes and addressing the racist housing policies that have been in place for decades. The vacant housing strategy also, and all of the work that we've done and the reduction that we've done and the work that has been happening in the vacants working group and out of the mayor's 30 days memo, works in areas across the cities. So it's the impact investment areas, it's our community development zones, it's the streamlined code enforcement areas, it's our crime prevention through environmental design pilot neighborhoods, it's our city agency collaborative areas that we work with the health department or BDC or BPD. It's our asset building community engagement areas with neighborhoods such as Westport, Berea, North Avenue Redevelopment Authority, Coppin Heights, areas around Mondawmin. Our major redevelopment areas, our development division projects, where we're engaging our developers, our middle neighborhoods, as well as state DHCD areas of focus that we work on. We also just want to do a reminder that we have all of the work on the vacancy memo and the items that were line-by-line updates help support us on the tools that we have in the toolbox, which are the 6 different forms of acquisition tools that we have, which cover donation, negotiation, in-rem foreclosure, property exchange, condemnation, eminent domain, and tax sale foreclosure. We also have code enforcement with receivership, and then we have our disposition methods and tools that we use. One item that we talked about today in the piece is the vacant strategy and what we're looking at, and this is looking at a whole block outcomes and a focus on the areas that we have, building off of assets, working with community, making decisions in terms of rehabilitation, demolition, green space. We have the vacant home strategy that outlines investments that are needed. As many of us have stated today, the investments needed are great, and we all recognize that, and we're all working together, in concert to do that. And then back to in-rem, in terms of a finalized component, we've created an in-rem dashboard that is we've taken a point in time, which is the most recent point in time, and we've created a dashboard that is able to show us all of the in-remable properties by council district. We can actually take that down to neighborhood, and it gives us a starting point, because one of the things that we've had to do, which this goes into part of the ARPA items and ARPA spending, is being able to do some of those analysis to see now what is eligible for in-rem and how are we shifting in terms of acquisition? What can we shift from paying for the property and using those funds for acquisition to what now is in-remable? So as you can see, on the dashboard, we've done this for vacant lots and vacant properties. Vacant properties is in red. It kind of correlates to code map. Vacant lots are in green. The dark red is the in-rem, the properties eligible for in-rem. The verb that we've created within DHCD is in-remable.
We use it.
And the properties in light red are not in-remable. The properties in dark green are, and the properties in light green are not. We also always have to remind everyone that a property marked in REM eligible on this dashboard still requires a title and lien examination, as well as a review of the code enforcement activities and review from the DHCD attorneys to become eligible. We have had properties that we have gone to put in for in-rem where either they've paid their liens or the assessed value changed, which took it off of the list. So with that, that just all ties together in terms of, once again, showing kind of where we are overall with the work on the 30 days vacant memo, the work within the mayor's work group that CAO has convened, and how all of that and all of those tools that we went through line by line impact all of the work that we're doing holistically across the agency to reduce vacants throughout the city. So they're all interconnected, they all work together, and they're all there so that we can work to continue to unravel the years of disinvestment across our neighborhoods.
Thank you so much for giving us 30, 40 minutes of a job that took several years to put together. And I'll let the sponsor of the resolution, if you have any final words, and then we'll take a vote.
I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
And then maybe my colleagues have questions as well, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Commissioner and your team, obviously thinking this through a lot. I'm very happy for the line by line, so we will be checking it up, so thank you very much for doing that. I also want to just, I have a question about the numbers on the dashboard. When I took a look at the dashboard a couple of weeks ago, I looked at the numbers for 2022, and that actually about 1,366 properties either got a use and occupancy permit or were demolished. Most got a use and occupancy permit, so they were rehabbed. And then an additional, however, an additional 1,189 properties came back online in terms of became vacant. So the net was actually only about 240 properties. I'm not sure where the 740 number came from, and so just wanted to kind of figure out, because when I did the math on the top line that goes down, it was like 600. So that's just a math issue that I think we need to kind of figure out. But the bottom line is that, you know, I think what the commissioner was emphasizing on the vacancy prevention side is literally just as important as the acquisition disposition side, because if we don't do the vacancy prevention side, then we're just going to be spinning our tails, you know, and also, you know, or what's the metaphor of hamsters in a wheel? That would be important. So I don't know, Commissioner, if you want to touch on the vacancy, the numbers first, and then you know, what we're looking at in the dashboard.
So I know in terms of the dashboard, there are specific points in time. So just to double check and repeat on the question, that when you were looking at the vacancy dashboard, you were working with the sliders and
Yes,
the data,
so you could see, like,
and looking at January 2022, and then taking where that was, but then looking at the other sliders and kind of adding. And so what you're saying is that what you were looking at for your math showed a net reduction of 241, and we're showing from January of 2022 to present a net reduction of 759. Kimberly, do you want to talk a little bit about the dashboard and those numbers? But the vacancy number, the 14,000, that number takes into consideration all of the other factors. And so that number is the number, so of the overall reduction that already takes into consideration the use and occupancy permits, the demolitions, and the new VBNs. So
Right. I understand that the total
So
at the top is supposed to take into consideration all of those. I just didn't see it. And that just might be something that we can look at the math, but.
So we can have Henry go into that, because that shows, because we went over the numbers again today with, in terms of what that net reduction is. So
Well, the 700 number, though, that was from March to March, right?
No, so it's actually from January to where we are today.
Oh, okay, so it's a little more.
Yeah, so actually the commissioner and I were just talking about this on email, because I did the same calculation, but I was basing it off of the number that was mentioned in the memo. And so if we looked at the number in the memo, which was in March, then it would be 640 or some odd. And so I talked to the commissioner about it, and when we look at the numbers from January 2022 to today, March 7th of 2023, that is where we get I think it's 752 if I'm not mistaken. But we can provide you with that
I think we just
information.
need to, I mean, I think the point is still clear, right? You need both, the vacancy prevention and the,
Yes.
and the acquisition disposition. I just wanted to make sure that when people are looking at the dashboard, that we're all looking at the same apples and oranges.
Okay,
But,
absolutely.
yeah, so we just need to clarify with you on that, because we've done the calculations based off of the dashboard, and the net reduction in vacants, you know, as we just said, from March to now, the net reduction is that 668 number, or and then the net reduction since January 2022 to present is the 754 number.
Right, but of those, I mean, a lot of those are still private market. It's not that the city owned them and disposed of them, correct? Do we know how many those were that the city owned them and disposed?
We can get you that detailed. So we know how many properties, that we have sold. So right now, the city only owns about 1,023 total of the vacant properties, which a lot of those actually we will not dispose of right now because they are next to other privately owned vacants. And, you know, we have to have the other tools in the toolbox, whether or not it be in-rem or acquisition, you know, in-rem, private negotiation, et cetera, to be able to look at how to acquire that so that we can have, you know, a strategic approach. Because if you just go in on the one and it has two vacants on the other side,
We're
it
clear
doesn't,
about that, right?
it doesn't work.
Yeah, so you're looking to sort of hold off on disposing those until we get the block strategies for them.
Some of those we actually don't dispose of, and then we're utilizing, and so that's where it comes in with all the analysis that we're doing for the acquisition of, you know, what's needed in terms of to acquire those, what's in REM eligible, what's not, what other tool in the acquisition box are we using to be able to tackle those ones. In terms of, you know, some of the numbers, we also know that we've, you know, still have sold, you know, in the last, I think, over fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23, we typically are selling of city-owned properties still kind of in that 150, 180, you know, 100 range of city-owned properties that we still sell kind of on average. And it has ranged, I think it was 2021 where we were over 200 city-owned
Yeah, those
properties.
are the scatter site though. Like for instance, the Tivoli project, you're not counting on those yet because we're not.
Yeah,
that's
those are,
totally,
these are, yeah.
right, we're, right, so the.
So
vacant
these are
buildings-
just sale, like the 221 that we were, like, that I'm mentioning, or the
Yeah.
100, or the 8, you know, like those numbers, that is just vacant, scattered site
Buildings.
property for, you know, renovation, for single family, residential use, you know, back in. That does not count large parcels or things along those lines, or ones that are through RFP or EOI.
Okay. And then my second question, then I'll hand it off to my colleagues, is the, again, you didn't mention a partnership with HABC. I know we talked about that before, where, you know, their scatter site inventory should really be put into this strategy, because, so hopefully we've been talking to HUD and to HABC to like, it is one of the lines in here, so.
It is one of the lines, and that is one of the ones that I skipped as we were condensing.
Sure.
So HABC has been actively, 29? HABC has actively been implementing their scattered site vacancy plan. To date, in keeping with their approved scattered sites plan, HABC has disposed of 106 of their scattered site units. They were disposed of through several different avenues, including direct sale as well as auction. In February of 2023, so just recently, HUD approved the disposal of an additional 147 units, 17 of which of those are vacant lots, and, you know, they're putting together the process in which those 147 will also be disposed of. So they are 100% part of this work in partnership, and we actually work very closely with HABC regarding their scattered site properties, because that is one of the areas where we often will also do property swaps with them in terms of looking at what is needed and how we go about doing that. So it has changed in some ways because we also have to now pay fair market value for those vacant properties from HABC when we're looking at that as part of kind of larger outcomes within when we're doing our block level planning with community as well in terms of targeting those.
Well, I just want to say that the other piece around the in-rem is really important. I'm super excited that we're moving in that direction. I also want to compliment the inspectors. They have overperformed, I think, which is really amazing. That, you know, prior to COVID, the city was only issuing about 800 failure to abate the vacant building notice citations, and then with this you know, work that we've all been working on has been doing so many more, so that more properties get into the NREM space, and it's over 4,300 this year. Is that correct, year to date?
We're at
Not year to date, but like
it's 5,366.
since January to March.
No, the last 12 months. Sorry.
The last 12 months. I'm sorry. That's okay. But that's astounding, and so I just want to kudos to the team on that, because we've been seeing it, and the bill that we're about to vote on is going to help, I think, move that forward. So just wanted to add that there, and also excited about the potential expansion of INREM that we're working on in the General Assembly, because that will help us with even more properties as well. So. Thank you. Ready to hand it off to any of my colleagues.
Keeping track of time, everyone, we have Councilman Bullock and then Councilman Stokes. Councilman Dorsey, any question? Okay. After those two, then we'll probably be prepared for a vote.
All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Kennedy and team. Obviously, thank you, Councilmember Ramos. Don't have much in the way of questions, but I do appreciate the work you've done on this front. I appreciate being briefed as well. So again, a lot of this is really review. So again, thank you for being so very detailed. One piece that was mentioned previous was around the education campaign, and then what I'll say, just want a little more depth about that. I'm glad to see that's happening. But then, can you also relate that to the hubs funding? I know it's increased funding, but how we're getting that message out to people. So it's really related in terms of how you're seeing things on the educational front. Thank you.
So the education campaign, you know, is encompassing all of the items that we know that are extremely important to both the elimination and prevention of vacancies. Hubs spreads like, you know, the biggest telephone game throughout the city. You know, we currently have over 2,000 pre-applications that are age eligible for hubs in the pipeline. So, you know, funding for hubs is something that we are constantly working on, and we'll continue to constantly work on in terms of being able to serve our older adults and our homeowners looking to age in place and have those supports in their home.
Right, I think I know we talked about this before, but one just follow up. I know it's a part of it's been just the delivery of services and walking clients through those processes. So I know that's part of the educational journey too, because sometimes in that game of telephone, sometimes things get miscommunicated, and I'm sure you also have to manage folks' expectations as well.
We do, and one other item that I didn't mention is that we also have a staff member that is a new staff member with a new position within the agency that's dedicated to community engagement, specifically community engagement components, which is different than our, you know, strategic communication. It augments that, right? So we will have someone that will be able to be at those community meetings, having the information out, and having those levels of community engagement and informing those additional conversations.
Well, please share that. I know at community meetings, people would love to have that.
Thank you. Councilman Stokes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I'm looking through the report. I think it's nice, but I guess the mayor been talking about this, and me and the council president been talking about this. In this report, I don't see an equity component to this. Is that something that, you know, I've been talking about in the mayor with? It's the equity component to this.
Absolutely. You know, this specific was tied directly, you know, as a line by line for the mayor's 30-day vacancy memo. But I will say that in the mayor's memo, as well as all of the work that we do, you know, equity within community development and equity within our work is a driving factor and a key ethos and mission that we have. Within DHCD, within the mayor's office, within the charge of of Mayor Scott and the work that we have. DHCD does have a now full-time equity officer that is 100% solely dedicated to equity and inclusion across all of the work that we've done. So all of the items that you see here, whether or not it's been working on within DHCD or our fellow city agencies, work with the equity officers within those agencies. I know that the equity officers across DPW, fire, law, all have participated in the mayor's vacants work group as part of this work, and we continue to use that equity lens on all of the work.
Will that be part of the dashboard? I mean, I don't see it here. And my other question is, you have an equity officer. Is it a full staff person? Because there's no way in one person can handle just the equity part in housing itself. So it's not just one person. Is there other employees that working with the director, whoever that is?
So we have a full-time equity officer, which is the first full-time equity officer, and then every single employee, all the deputy commissioners, all of the staff, chief of staff, commissioners, everybody continues to work on equity. So we have someone that helps coordinate the efforts, review, strive us to do better. But every single employee within the city agency, especially the employees that are at the senior leadership levels, our deputy commissioners, our assistant commissioners, our chiefs, our directors, all understand and know and have been trained, and we've looked at and understand the importance of equity and what that means when creating those policies, and what it means as part of this memo when we talk about having to unravel the components of decades of disinvestment, of decades of racist housing policies in our city that have, resulted in disinvestment, communities that have to live with this every day, and the generational trauma that has, impacted and gone on within our families across the city.
So I'm sorry.
So I do want to acknowledge that in the PowerPoint presentation that the commissioner walked through.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I do want to acknowledge that in the PowerPoint presentation that the commissioner walked through, she actually discussed the equity framework. So we'll be sure that we share the equity framework with you, and I think that governs all of the work that happens within DHCD. If I understand the request correctly, the request is, or the question is about how we can include our equity work on the dashboard so that it is public facing. Was that?
Yes, and actually, real quick, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, I know I've been talking a lot, but actually give us a report on when we talk about equity, when it wasn't implemented back then, and where it is, and what you are doing to show the difference in the data where the equity is really working. Can that be a request?
Yes, it can.
Thank you, and I'll be quiet, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So Resolution 22-0101R, informational hearing, mayor's recommendations, 30-day review of strategies to eliminate vacant and abandoned properties. Is there a motion to move the bill?
So moved.
Second.
So moved by Ramos, second by Bullock. Chair Middleton, yes. Councilman Bullock?
Yes.
Is a yes. Councilman Conway, absent. Councilman Dorsey?
Yes.
Is a yes. Councilman Glover, absent. Councilwoman Ramos?
Yes.
Is a yes. Councilman Stokes?
Yes.
Is a yes. This bill will move to second reader at the next council meeting. And now we will have a voting session for bill number 22-0204, vacant structures 311 complaint fines, for the purpose of establishing a fee structure for repeated 311 service requests, providing for a special effective date, and generally relating to fining the owner of a vacant structure for repeated service requests. The bill was introduced on March 21st, 2022. The bill was sponsored by President Mosby. The committee will now reconvene the meeting for a voting session, and we do have amendments to consider for this bill. The original bill dealt with the Baltimore City Code Article 13, Housing and Urban Renewal. Division 2, dwellings and vacant structures, Subtitle 4, registration of non-owner occupied dwellings, rooming houses, and vacant structures. The proposed amendments deals with Article Building, Fire, and Related Code, Section 2-103, Section 116, Unsafe Structures, and subsection 116-4-1-3, Nuisance Property, and Section 2-103, 123-8, Notices, and Baltimore City Code, Article 1, Mayor, City Council, and Municipal Agencies, Section 40, 149 EO 5C. So we'll have, I guess to clarify the proposed amendments, I think I'd like to start with Aaron just for clarification, and then Hillary, and then Councilwoman Ramos.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify on the amendments, there was a question about whether or not there's an issue with the council rules in the amendment to the bill, because it does have a strike-through for so much of the bill language. But in my opinion, as I read through it and discussed it with the law department, I don't have any problem with with that rule, with the amendment, because that is only a problem when the amendment would change the basic purpose of the bill. And here, even though it does strike out so much of the language, it maintains the basic purpose of the original bill. So there's no problem with Council Rule 11-3, in my opinion.
And thank you. And we do know that the sponsor, which is the council president, and Councilwoman Ramos have been working together all along with this. So appreciate that. And then Hillary, the law department has an amendment?
The law department's suggested amendment was incorporated into what the councilwoman has, and it's been approved for form and legal sufficiency, and there's no issue with the city council rule. We agree with
Thank you for that clarification, and then for the committee, and then Councilwoman Ramos.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Everybody should have the amendment in front of you. Basically, it strikes most of the bill because I think what the council president was trying to do was to increase the fines and the fees in order to get more properties into in-rem, or at least for the owners to take the situation seriously. And so we've clarified all of that in this bill. In this amendment, excuse me, we focused it just on vacant and abandoned properties. What is done here is there is still the escalating fee. Basically, if you look on page 3, what we say is, currently the law says that if someone has a vacant and abandoned property and they don't take care of it or don't do anything with it, they're going to get a failure to abate the notice citation. That's $1,000. We are adding that if the building is unsecured, it'll get another $1,000. If the building has high grass and weeds, it's got to be vacant in order to get another $1,000. If the building has roof damage, and we just heard about the roof study, it will be another $1,000. And then subsequent citations within the year will be another $1,000. So a property could get up to about between $4,000 and $9,000 if they're, in really bad shape. And again, the whole goal here is to get it into the in-rem process because, as I've said, many of you have heard me say, in my district with the two neighborhoods that we did a study on, of the 450 properties in those 2 neighborhoods, 28% of them are ready for in-rem right now. And another 35% of them are approaching in-rem. And so this will help us move in that direction to get them in there. And so I'm grateful to work with the council president on this and look forward to the committee's support. And I move the amendment.
Okay, amendment moved by Ramos. Is there a second? Second. Second by Dorsey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Is there a bill to move, is there a motion to move the bill as amended?
So moved.
So moved by Ramos, second by Dorsey. Stokes
Yes.
is a yes. Ramos
Yes.
is a yes. Glover absent. Dorsey is a yes. Conway absent. Bullock is a yes. And Middleton is a yes. This bill will move to second reader.
And thank you to DHCD for working on this bill. Appreciate it.
Now we move to the final bill for the day, Resolution 22-0140R, Informational Hearing Permit Reforms. For the purpose of inviting representatives from the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Office of the City Administrator, the Baltimore City Fire Department, Office of the Fire Marshal, and other relevant parties to provide information on reforms to the Department of Housing and Community Development's permit process. This resolution was introduced on October 9th, 2022. This resolution was sponsored by Councilwoman Ramos. Councilwoman Ramos, I understand that you have been in communication with the administration and have outlined to them certain information that you would like agencies to provide. Would you like to comment on the resolution?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to DHCD and also to the committee. This resolution comes from building off of what we just heard, but also the fact that we've had, at least in my office, we've had several difficulties that have come to us with the permit office. And it is clearly important that if we are going to rehab all of these properties, if folks are going to rehab the properties, that they have to have a good relationship with the permit office, and that we have to have a permit office that's going to be efficient and effective. We don't want to cut corners because we don't want the building unsafe, but we certainly want to have, you know, that the fact that I hear all the time that they can't get a contractor because contractors don't want to work in our city, or that we've got homeowners that are trying to get something done that it's hard to get through the system. And then also, I mean, I've had an experience where plans were actually approved on a project, and then the inspection, after she built the whole thing, the addition on her house, the inspection failed because the plan shouldn't have been approved in the first place. So I know the commissioner has been diligent about figuring out how the permit office will be reformed, so I look forward to hearing her thoughts about this. We do have folks interested in testifying. Madam Chair, I'm also clear that we do have a time constraint because we do have another hearing at 5. Commissioner, I know if you've got anything else to add to, you know, if you've got another slideshow or anything, then we would love to have it. We'd like to have the other ones too. And just to go over some of the things that, you know, your office is planning on reforms, addressing some of the specifics in the resolution. The fire marshal is here. I asked them to be here as well, because one of the things that we've also heard is that, you know, exchange with the fire marshal, given a couple of experiences my businesses have had. So if we can, you know, maybe take a little bit of time, and then we do, I believe, have folks online testifying and some maybe in the chamber. So thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity.
So, and I do want to make, as a matter of record, we have a letter of testimony from the sponsor, Councilwoman Ramos, about this particular bill and some of the problems and complaints that she has come to. So we'll start with our Housing Commissioner.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Alice Kennedy, Housing Commissioner, still here. Chairwoman and members of the committee. We do have a presentation for you this afternoon that I believe we're going to be pulling up.
Can we get all of these too? Because we don't have them in our inboxes, so if you can.
So we'd like copies sent to the
to the committee.
Okay, so we're gonna just go over right now the kind of e-permits and e-plans overhaul and review. So one thing is that, you know, permitting services covers inspections, zoning, construction, alteration, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing work. It is a hub and spoke model. The other item that I want to say is that DHCD currently employs 18 staff members that works on permits and plans review. In 2022, DHCD processed a total of 40,931 permits. 18 staff processed 40,931 permits, which is a lot. That is a lot of permits, and, you know, is a significant amount of work. While they have processed those amount of permits, we fully recognize that there are issues, you know, right now that we want to kind of talk about and highlight is that the current system that we have is over 15 years old. It requires, you know, updates. We have customer service components that we've looked at in terms of how we can rethink customer service to better this as part of the process. The model for permit processing within the city of Baltimore is a hub and spoke model. DHCD is the hub, and the spoke involves many different agencies, from the Department of Planning to BMZA to the fire department to the health department to the Department of Transportation. In terms of some of the work that we've done to date, you know, we started actually working on examining the workflows and what was needed in the permitting system back into 2021. Through the ARPA investment, the mayor has dedicated $3 million to this work, because one of the things in evaluating workflows and how everything is connected, this isn't just about updating the software system for permitting, which we know needs to be updated to have a better kind of user interaction, what I call the human-computer interaction component, that user design between not just for the public and those that are the users of the system on the outside, but also for our staff. And having a better user design and user experience for staff in terms of efficiencies and work there. This also ties with our code enforcement system, which is called CHIP. So we cannot do the permitting system without also doing an upgrade to CHIP as well. The system is fragmented currently. You know, it's over 15 years old. It is, you know, identified by both internal and external stakeholders have said that it's fragmented, it's time-consuming, it's complex, and it doesn't allow for that strong and strengthening and ease of communication between the users and staff, vice versa, as well as also between the different agencies. For over a year now, we've been evaluating workflows associated with the process. We hired a new staff person to come on that is actually Valentina Ucuomo, who is leading project manager on this. She's a senior advisor to the commissioner and commissioner's office. And this is one of the projects that she is working on within DHCD that she's responsible for. And through that, we've started to have, you know, meetings and findings across all of the different agencies that are involved in permitting. We've been working with BSIT on kind of stabilizing the system that we have so that we can continue to work through that. We've had conversations with other jurisdictions across the city. Deputy Hessler is key to this process and working with Val and the team on this work. You know, overall, for the majority of the permits, while we have the hub and spoke model, we've processed over 40,000 permits in last year. We do want to note that, you know, depending upon the nature of that permit, the processing, we have permits that are processed the same day. We have permits that can be processed between 24 and 48 hours. But we also are aware that there are more complex permits that can take longer. And sometimes those factors that make them take longer fall out of the direct purview of DHCD as the hub, but also fall into some of our other agency partners. One item that is very important to note is that during the COVID pandemic, DHCD successfully transitioned to the entire 100% online system for 100% of applications or permits are filed and processed in line. The One-Stop Shop Permit Center did reopen from COVID in August 16th of 2021, and some customers still do prefer to come into the shop and work with the office staff, but it is available to do permits 100% online. In terms of, we know that there are challenges in processing the permits, both in person and online. We know that there are functionality issues. We know that there are different voids in terms of information, and we're committed to improving the process and creating a system that will provide user-friendly workflow with ease of access for all stakeholders involved. So, we're replacing the existing system with an up-to-date software that works for everybody. When I say everybody, talk about this is equity at play, Councilman Stokes. Everybody, okay? This is one of those items. Glenda Curtis, our equity advisor, is involved in this process because it is for everybody, both also from the public, but also everybody, including staff, because it has to work for staff within DHCD, it has to work within staff for the fire department, DPW, Department of Planning, and all of the users that are working on this. Making sure that everything is digitized so that we can make it faster, simpler, easier for the applicants, the reviewers, and the approvers. We want to ensure that the workflows are fully automated, coordinating the approvals and the reviews between the agencies, and ensuring that we have the digital archive of all of those transactions. Create that additional level of transparency. The cloud-based platform will also be available on any computer or any device at any time from any location, which is also extremely important because that will allow inspectors to actually enter case data in the field. So if they need to enter a photograph, if they need to enter case notes or whatever, and they're in the field, they will be able to do that from the field. So it's having a system that works and is cohesive, comprehensive, and works across all of the agencies to be able to do the work that they need. Automates the process of scheduling and rescheduling those inspections, and overall improves general customer service. One of the things that we're also looking at on the customer service side is actually creating a call center hub instead of having like a phone call. One of the complaints that we do get is I'm calling and no one is answering the phone. Right. That is because one of the 18 staff members is actually either on the phone or actively doing the work of approving someone else's permit. And it is just with the sheer volume that we have, some of the phone calls to assist a resident can take 2 hours. We have had people assisting with contractors or plans review or engineers or so forth, where they're on a phone talking about one permit and one process for as long as 2 hours, if not more, having to hang up and call right back. So we know that that phone answering is an issue. That isn't because no one is there, and it is not because there isn't somebody doing a job. This staff is hardworking, they are showing up, and they are consummate public servants in doing this job to process the amount of permits that we process in a year to the best of their ability. So we know that we can do better to help them. So how can we help them, and how can we come in, which is trying to create kind of a call center model to help manage those phone calls, direct those phone calls, and ensure that there's timely responses and so forth. We have kind of our next steps in terms of action plan on this, where we've completed and I've identified the stakeholders. We have stakeholder input. We've already started stakeholder focus group meetings. We completed a survey that was sent out to over 20,000 users of the system. We received over 900 responses to the survey. We're in the process of analyzing all of those survey responses and data points to find out what are the key barriers, what rises to the top as those key barriers. Gathering those informations, Deputy Hessler and Ms. Uomo, they've had meetings with other jurisdictions. We've looked at other jurisdictions across the state in terms of the technology that they use, their workflows, what works, what doesn't work. We've had additional stakeholder meetings that are there's another one tomorrow that's happening on those. We'll be going through kind of the vendor assessment and search in partnership with BSIT. We anticipate to have a vendor selected by the end of the spring, early summer, and then work into the refinement of the workflows, refinement of the workflows with our fellow agencies, and then working on those workflows, getting those into the new system, migrating everything, testing, surveying, reaching out, having those conversations so that we're working with all of the agencies in terms of continuing to test the process, test the workflows, make any of those changes, and then we anticipate that we would launch the program after kind of fully launch. And I'm reminding this is specific to permits, but simultaneously we have to be doing this with CHIP, which is on the enforcement side as well, because it's all working together. So this is a very large undertaking for staff and the agency and BSIT and what we're doing here, but they are in concert, they work in concert, and they need to work in concert so that we can have the appropriate enforcement mechanisms that are also tied on the permitting side. We anticipate with the current timeline that once we go through selection of the vendors working through all the workflows and the different modules that are involved and how that plays out, and we are testing and working and doing the additional focus groups, that we would end up being able to launch kind of a full testing, launch a full new program sometime in the beginning of calendar year 2024, like that kind of January, February timeframe of 2024 for full kind of launch. Because not only in this training is training staff, but we will also have to be training the public so that once we move to the full system, people are fully ready and able to go to pull the trigger. And I think that's one of our lessons learned from some of the other things that we've done is over the years is not having that time built in to properly train not just staff, but the public on how to use the program that we're using.
Thank you. So I know you had mentioned there were 900 survey responses, so that's letting us know reform is underway. 900.
A lot of people had a lot to say.
Responses. That's pretty good. Any questions for the commissioner, and then we'll. I know the fire department has been
I have a question.
Waiting. Go ahead, Councilman Stokes.
Commissioner, I'm glad to hear you open up a call center because my colleagues can actually vouch that a lot of, Councilwoman said it, that a lot of developers don't actually want to deal with the frustration with permits here. My question is, how many people going to be at the call center, and will they be cross-trained? Because I have called other over there for permits, and they say, well, this particular person is out, and we got to wait till they come back. So the cross-training piece, I don't hear, because when you call, and I'm sure my colleagues can agree, that when you call the particular person that's responsible for whatever that permit process is, they are out. So you got to wait till that person come back, because it seems like nobody else know how to do their job while they might be out. I've experienced this even back in 2016. A gentleman was rehabbing an apartment building, and they told him to go back down to the first floor. When he went back down to the first floor, they told him to go back to the second floor, and the person that was responsible for his permit, it was a lady, and she was out on maternity leave. So none of the permit process was done, and that was back in 2016. I'm glad you talking about a call center and find out exactly how you make this a process a little shorter, but customer friendly here in Baltimore. So my question is just, will those persons that you're bringing into the call center, will they be cross-trained?
So the purpose of the call center is to try to centralize staff that are able to manage the phone calls, right? And then direct those phone calls to staff that then are responsible for the different functions of permit processing, because there's different functions that are involved depending upon the type of permit, whether or not, you know, we're talking about plans review and et cetera. Do you want to talk a little bit?
The permit techs deal with the bulk of the permits. About 40,000 of them are just going through the permit techs, and they are cross-trained. They can handle those average permits. When you get into the larger projects, the projects that require plans, there are specific reviews that need to be completed by people with special training and technical, you know, so you need a mechanical engineer to review the mechanical drawings, electrical engineer for the electrical drawings, and et cetera. So in some cases, cross-training is impossible just based on knowledge and training. But when somebody's going to be out in those fields, we do make an effort to clear out any items that are pending and then reassign stuff that can be covered by another staff member. So you shouldn't see that.
So my question may be, I wasn't talking about the actual call center. I'm talking about people having permits, and I'm not talking about the drawings. I have called, and people that were waiting for permits called, the email, no response. As soon as I sent the email, they said, oh, here's your permit. We're going to email it to you. That's the frustration that a lot of developers or persons just want a simple permit to rehab their house. As soon as I send an email, they seem to find a permit, and they can either email it or send it to them real quick. That's actually what I'm talking about when I talk about that smaller permit process. Have y'all found a way to kind of streamline that? Because actually, it's still happening. Because I had somebody today say they've been waiting for a permit for 3 months. They done called, they don't get an answer. They email, don't get an answer. And as soon as I sent an email, they had the permit number. They told them, here it is. So my question is, how do you streamline that and make it customer friendly? Because it's till a day, and I know it's a whole lot of work in terms of permitting the city, not trying to beat nobody up, but how do y'all make it more simple? Because right now, it's still the same. We can say it, we changing it, but a lot of the emails, and I'm sure my colleagues feel like it's still the same.
Sure. The goal of implementing the new system is to make it simpler so that there's less need to communicate, which frees up staff time to be able to process things faster. Part of what I talk about in this is creating a system that builds a better customer. So having the training materials there that are linked directly into particular pieces, streamlining, correcting language that may make it confusing or difficult, just a simpler system so that the initial user, the customer, when they're coming in, can easily figure out how to apply, make sure that they're submitting all the necessary items, because what really delays most of the permits is that information is missing. Maybe sketches or drawings aren't added. They haven't provided enough information for the staff to understand the job that they're doing. And it's not necessarily the customer's fault, it's that in our current system, we're not asking for clear enough information and gathering everything that's needed initially so that it can be processed. With that said, the bulk of those 40,000 permits are issued within a day or two. And there are some there that take longer, but they are processing the bulk of permits quickly.
So one more question. Commissioner, how many persons do you have in the office that actually handle the kind of simple kind of permits? Because it sounds like they overwhelm with permits. So if my question is how many you have, and do you need additional people to just handle the permits here in the city?
Yep, we currently have 6 permit techs that handle all the permits, not just simple permits.
How many?
There's 6 permit techs currently. There's 1 position, 2 positions that are being filled. So we've had some turnover.
So you had over 40 permits, and you only have 6 people. Wow. Yeah. I think maybe the commissioner, you might have to ask for additional employees in this piece to kind of pick up some of those permits. You're talking about 40,000 and 6 people. That's a lot on 6 people. So maybe that's something that housing need to look at and hire some more people to handle the permit process. Thank you.
Just in the city in general, as far as hiring of employees, there is approximately, for retirement, there are approximately 40 applications a month of people retiring from city government. So that's something else that I guess the city really has to look at overall, because that's scary. Any other question?
I have some.
Oh, Councilwoman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question about, and it kind of goes with what we had been talking about. You had mentioned that the new technology slate would connect with the code enforcement, and one of the things that I want to make sure happens is that when, because we just talked about doing a lot of citations on these properties, but if they've got a permit on them, like somebody's actually doing work on the property, we don't want to cite them. So I want to make sure that if they're not if they've got permits on them and they're not doing the work, they need a little push. I got that. But I'm just saying that the two systems now will talk to each other so that, Inspector Odoms will say, oh, because he's in my area, oh, this has a permit on it, let me go check and see what's going on over here, so that there's a little bit more communication.
Yeah, so there's, the existing system actually has that ability. Like the inspectors can, with a click, get in and see if there's active permits or not. The inspector themselves is going to be on their visual inspection, be able to tell whether or not work is going on. That will continue in the new system. What we are looking for an upgrade is the ability to, I call it flagging a property, but a system where when the inspector goes in, certain comments can pop up. Right. And so if it's part of a development project that the city is investing millions of dollars in, and we know what's going on as far as maintaining the property, what's going to be built there, and maybe it's still got to go through zoning or whatever, we'd be able to flag that property so the inspector would see, like, okay, this isn't one I need to run down and find the owner and cite them and do all these other things, because we know exactly what's going on here. Development Group X is working with Department of Housing, and they're investing $20 million, and this is going to be beautiful in the coming months, like work's going to start. So we could flag whatever it may be for the inspectors, so that it's much easier for them without having to click through multiple levels.
Sure.
And
That's good.
try and siphon what's going on.
Sure. I have another question, but I know that we want to get to the fire marshal as well.
Okay.
So why don't we get to the fire marshal?
Yes, the fire department.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. Kim Washington on behalf of the Baltimore City Fire Department. I am joined by Deputy Chief Derek Reddy, who is the fire marshal. We look forward to working with HCD as one of those spokes on the hub, and streamlining the process so that the system works better for our customers and citizens of Baltimore.
Madam Chair, I have a question for the fire department.
Go ahead.
And I think it goes to both of you. We had an issue, you're familiar with this issue, of the permit office saying to one of my businesses, hey, you can just put this much fire suppression in, and then the fire marshal going in and going, no, you can't do that. You need to do even more. And I'm grateful we were able to work out something in the interim for that business to open, because they weren't going to be able to afford what we need to actually put in. So how does that interaction work? Are you going to be doing some retraining of, how does this work so that kind of stuff doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I mean, I believe I know the situation you're talking about, and the failure there really was not on the city. If what was submitted was built, the fire marshal's office would have approved it. The problem is that what was reviewed and approved isn't what ended up getting built and inspected. And so that's where the complication came in.
Oh, I thought that my understanding of the situation, and I think this has happened in other situations with other businesses, was they submitted plans that were approved by DHCD.
Correct.
But then when the fire marshal came in, they said no. And is it that the plan shouldn't have even been?
Right. So I think the issue was that that set of plans did not go to the fire marshal for review because what was submitted didn't require fire marshal review. But what ended up getting built was different than what was approved, and it changed it and put it into they call it a use group, but it put it into a different use group. There was more space for more people to be there, and therefore, had that initially been submitted, we would have kicked it to the fire marshal for review, and the fire marshal would have required, a change to the plans.
So how do we avoid that in the future, right? Because we can't always count that the contractor or the homeowner or whoever it is going to get the plan submitted properly the first time. Like, can the person who's working with them say, are you going to have more than 100 people? Are you going to do that? Like, do a little bit more probing and try, so that, because I think this is a similar situation that happened with, by the way, my next door neighbor, when, she had, the plans were proposed, she got them approved, she had the wrong windows, but those were approved, and then the inspector, failed it. It seems to me like there needs to be a little bit more back and forth with the permit office so that they, are able to get the right stuff, the person's able to get the right things submitted. So that's why I'm just trying to figure out how to avoid this in the future, because that's going to cost a bunch of money for both of these people.
Right.
So.
What we do offer, and many individuals take advantage of, is the planning staff will meet via Zoom. It used to be in person, but via Zoom now, prior to the submission of any plans, to go over any concerns that may exist. And they do that every Tuesday and Thursday, scheduled times. And if the fire marshal's office is needed, they'll join in. We do it with big projects, we do it with small projects. So, I've had those meetings with Under Armour, and then we've had those meetings with just, a neighbor trying to put an extension on their house, and they're not sure they have enough space or how high they can go, or different concerns there. And then we also do the code modifications where appropriate, where in some cases somebody can't build to what our code has, and they can demonstrate that what they are building still meets the spirit of the code and provides protection, life, health, and safety, and won't put anybody in danger. So we have that code modification request that also helps people.
Right, you've described that to me before. I don't have the website pulled up, but is there something on the website that says, hey, if you need, to do plan review, like come make an appointment for 2 o'clock on Friday or whatever it is, I mean, I'm not sure that all of maybe it is well known, maybe it's not, but I think we just have to be a little bit more proactive with folks so that we don't get into a situation. We also had the situation with my constituent who wanted to put in a wood stove, or not a wood, whatever, it was a pellet stove. And, that caused all kinds of consternation because there needed to be some HVAC, and that didn't, so it was just a lot of.
We have to check for testimony.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. So anyway, I just, if we could be a little bit more proactive in trying to get folks to understand what they really need, that would be helpful. And Kim wanted to add to that.
I just wanted to add before Chief Reddy could that we probably have fewer reviewers for the number of plans that we get through than housing does. So just to put that on the record.
Well, money.
We had 3 plan reviewers.
And you need how many?
Well,
You can get back to us with that number.
yes, I'll get back to you. But we have actively, it's 2, but the fire commander is also operating as a plan reviewer because we're so short.
Okay, so given that we've got 40,000 permits, not all of them need fire marshal, but it would be interesting to know how many, how much. I anticipate that the demand for all of your services is going to grow exponentially, just given what we heard before. So we need to figure out what what you need.
Yes.
So if you can give us those
Be
numbers, that would
prepared
be
for
good.
the budget session.
That's exactly right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other members before we go to public testimony? We have no one that has signed up in person, but before we go to online and calls, is there anyone here that is here to testify on this bill? And seeing no one, so we'll now check with hand raises. And I don't see any hand raises.
Do they know to use the raise hand function on the bottom right?
So if you would like to testify, you can use the raise your hand on the lower hand raise for anyone that wants to testify. And seeing no hands raised, we'll try with the phone calls. Are there any phone callers? You'll hear a beep, and we'll start with Bree. Bree, we're trying to unmute you. Did you want to testify on this bill? Hello?
The council and the HCD and the fire department for all of their work and for this discussion today.
Thank you. Core, you're next. Try to unmute yourself. Did you want to testify on this bill?
Because it is very important that we do reach some resolve.
Could you repeat what you said? We couldn't hear you. Understand you. Hello?
Hi, I was just saying thank you for holding this meeting today. It's very important that we reach some resolve.
Thank you for your comments. Moving down to Jay Lewis. Any testimony today on this bill? Jay Lewis. Hearing none. Leah. Oh, Stacy? Stacy, we're trying to unmute you. Did you want to testify on this bill? Hello, Stacy. Yes, Stacy?
I'm sorry.
Did you want to testify on this bill? The permit reform bill?
No, Councilwoman, my apologies. I'm good.
Okay. And the last person, Terry Sims. Did you want to testify on this bill?
That's me.
Yes. Terry?
Did you hear me? I said, no, I have no testimony at this time, but thanks for having this meeting.
Thank you. And we do have your written suggestion from the first bill that will be shared.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's it for testimony. At this time, I think we're going to go in recess with this bill. Does the sponsor have any last comments?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to everybody who put the various presentations together. Since, Commissioner, you were saying that you would do some of these upgrades and different things by January, want to bring you back and just sort of see, progress as things move forward. And I'm sure we'll all be asking more questions during budget hearings as well. So, we won't be voting this out today. Yeah.
Okay. Understood. I just also wanted to add one item that I forgot to add before, which is that part of this also includes education. So in this is a whole other separate piece outside of just training. That training module is the education and outreach just about what is required of for a permit in Baltimore City, because there's a significant amount of misinformation that exists in the public among homeowners, contractors, et cetera, and there's a lot of misinformation that is being provided by contractors to homeowners that are looking to get work done, et cetera. So that's part of this work as well, not just the system.
Yeah, appreciate that. Madam Chair, we have one question before we recess.
Councilman Dorsey.
Can the public have some of that misinformation dispelled at Coffee with Alice at noon on Friday?
Yes, Councilman Dorsey. Part of that, the public can have some of that information dispelled at Coffee Break with Alice on noon on Friday.
Where would said public go to find more information about Coffee with Alice at noon on Friday?
For you a softball here, go ahead.
You can find out more information on the of the Coffee Break with Alice on the Department of Housing and Community Development website. That also, I believe, has the link posted for Coffee Break with Alice, where you can register and submit questions in advance so that we are prepared to help answer your questions, and then take any questions during the hour that we have to join you with coffee on Friday.
I really appreciate you plugging this great public service.
And on that note, I want to thank everyone for attending today's hearing. This hearing is now recessed.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.